each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. For as in one body we have many members, and not all the members have the same function, so we who are many are one body in Christ, and individually we are members one of another. We have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us: prophecy in proportion to faith, ministry in ministering, the teacher in teaching, the exhorter in exhortation, the giver in generosity, the leader in diligence, the compassionate in cheerfulness. Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor, do not lag in zeal, be ardent in spirit, serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, persevere in prayer, contribute to the needs of the saints, extend hospitality to strangers. From the Gospel of Mark, we hear this. Then Jesus' mother and his brothers came, and standing outside they sent to him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside asking for you." And Jesus replied, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." Here ends our readings. Amen.
Doug reads rather well. It's like he's done it before. That's Romans 12, verse 2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God. I mean, that's what it's all about here today. Discerning of the will of God. This role of taking a position in ministry with a specific congregation is not like any other job placement, in the world. It's not just about accepting a position in a certain place, doing a certain thing with a bunch of people. I mean, there's a whole other element when it comes to ministry. It's because, we answer to the big boss. We need to discern the will of God. And this isn't always an easy thing. There's been a few times in my life where I've known with every fiber of my being that I was doing absolutely what God wanted. And I was 100% sure. But then there must be 100 times where maybe I wasn't so sure. When you need to make this decision. And as you pray and you hope that God is moving you in the right direction, you sometimes challenge your thoughts. Is this God's will or is this my will? It feels so right, it feels so good, but is it just because what I want or is it what God wants? And so you can become somewhat tormented. Is that am I really doing the will of God? Discerning the will of God. Well, I want to tell you a story about it. Personal, true story. And it's about my brother Chris. And some of you know I grew up in Boisvane, south of here, on a farm, small farm outside of town, and was growing up, on a farm. As many as you know, there's sort of a special relationship with siblings because they're your primary playmates as you're growing up, or at least until you get older into your teens, when you start getting more mobile. You start moving with other groups of friends, but you spend a lot of time with these individuals, and you get to know them very well. Well, when I left for university, I was the eldest. I left for university at 18. 2 years later, my brother left for college, and so really what it comes down to is about 1984, 1985. From about that point on, my brother and I have never lived in the same province at the same time. And, you know, I'm not great at maintaining long-distance relationships. I'm just not one that like quickly picks up the phone. And you know what? My brother's probably worse. And so we had very different lives, and we were doing very different things and very different interests. And so a lot of years went by. There's literally times where maybe a few years would go by without us communicating. But then that changed. About 4 or 5 years ago, when, or it's actually about 6 years ago, when I decided to take this call to go into ministry. Meanwhile, my brother, who he had gone through his life, he was trained in technology. That was his love, right from about 16 years old. He's like the geek of technology geeks. I mean, there's sort of your like there's your regular geeks, and then there's your super geeks, and then like Chris is just a little bit above that, you know. Like he lives in that whole electronic world. And so he took a job with this company designing and installing commercial audio-visual systems. And this job took him to Kelowna, BC. And so he's doing that for a few years, very successful with it, but that company started to falter, and it was a small business, and the ownership with these two guys, and so things were getting a little shaky there, and so he starts looking for employment elsewhere, but he'd really settled in with their family in Kelowna, really loved Kelowna, and so there was really sort of some limited options. And so Chris and his family were worshiping at Willow Park Mennonite Church in Kelowna. And to get a little bit of an idea about Willow Park, well, it peaked for a while there about 7,000 members. Now it has settled down to about 5,000. And they have multiple services at multiple locations through the weekend. And they use technology to like simultaneously broadcast to different places, rooms, as well as access TV, as well as live stream on the web, and all this kind of thing. So Willow Park, his church, said, hey, we'll hire you full-time to manage our technology. I mean, they had about $1.5 million worth of like technical equipment for the production of their services. Like they have bands and you know, huge productions, light, sound, like, you know, Hollywood. And so they hired him full-time in the church. And he took this on enthusiastically and really considered it his ministry of taking the word to people through running the technology. And to get an idea about the size of this, Willow Park takes 24 volunteers on any given weekend to execute just the technology. And they do a 4-week rotation, so you only do 1 in 4. So Chris has 92 volunteers just for tech production. So this is a big church doing big things, and a big ministry team. So right about the time that I'm discerning to go into ministry, my brother was getting some pressure. I mean, besides his technology gifts, he also has demonstrated some possible clergy type gifts, and there was the occasional time that he'd actually spoken, and so there was people from the congregation, there's people from the ministry team that were really encouraging him to take more of a clergy type role in their church. But Chris loves his electronic toys. You know, that's his passion, and that's where he's comfortable. And so he was really torn about, you know, should I continue to do my geek stuff, or you know, am I really supposed to go on and do something more like clergy? And so as I'm discerning for ministry as well, this became the common ground where we started to talk, and we started to call each other more often, or emails, or even through Facebook. And so as it's going, and as Chris is discerning this, I'm seeing some posts, or he even mentioned in a phone call of how it was somewhat annoying to him that God kept waking him up at 3 in the morning to talk.
That's what's
That's how he described it. And it wasn't just happening once in a while. It was happening multiple times a week. And that's how he described it. God keeps getting me up at 3 in the morning to talk. So, didn't pry into that and just took it at face value. And so that's all good. So one day I happened to notice on Facebook there's a picture of my brother. Now to back up a little bit, my brother, his appearance was not anything that was really important to him. Chris was more about convenience and comfort than style. And and it was always, even as a kid, it was difficult to get him to get his hair cut and so on and so forth. So anyways, up to this point, and at this time, Chris had gone 5 years without getting a haircut, okay? And he was wearing his hair pulled back. He's got a better hairline than I do, and he's got a good thick head of hair. His hair was pulled back into a braid that reached his butt. Had this ponytail. And he always sort of had a scruffy, unkept beard, and so really, I mean, the best way I could give you a visual image of Chris is that he sort of looks like a cross between me and Willie Nelson. All right? If you can picture that, that's my brother Chris. But he kind of really owned that look, and it sort of became part of his identity. And because it's a big church and lots of people around, and all these tech guys, and if someone says, "Hey, I'm looking for Chris Neufeld," "Oh, it's the guy with the ponytail. You can't miss him," and you would soon locate him. So, anyways, this is Chris. So, and I, as big brothers do, it's our job to torture our younger siblings, right? And so I would give him a hard time about, "Hey, get a haircut, you hippie," blah, 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 this kind of stuff. And so anyways, one day I look on Facebook, and he's put a new profile picture up, and his hair's short. And so I give him a call. I said, "Chris, you got your hair cut?" He goes, "Yeah, actually, it was about 6 months ago." "Oh, okay." He hadn't updated any other picture. This is the first he'd put a picture on Facebook, and we're a few provinces apart, so, I wouldn't have known this. And so he goes, "I didn't tell you the story about my haircut?" I go, "No." "Okay, well, I need to tell you about this." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Well, it started one night at 3 a.m. when God called me, woke me up to talk. And so I'm talking with God, and then all of a sudden he goes, 'Chris, it's time to cut your hair.'" And Chris is kind of like, "Well, really? Chris, it's time to cut your hair." So Chris, good, faithful, obedient servant of God, he heads into the bathroom. It's 3 a.m. He heads into the bathroom, and he finds some scissors or whatever, and so he's there in the mirror, and he's got hold of the, he's trying to, in the mirror, trying to figure it out, and God goes, "No, you need to go to a salon." So, all right. Now, I realize, I did take a time out right here. I realize there's those of you in the pews, maybe all of you right now are going, "Okay, right, Doug, there's specific details coming from God. Like, what are you saying he's talking to God, right? Is it just an idea, or sort of a feeling that's sort of come upon him through the Spirit? Or is this kind of like a Moses and burning bush thing, from the Ten Commandments? Is like, is he hearing voices? That might be what you're thinking right now, right? And so I can stand before you today and tell you, I don't know. All right? Because when he's telling me the story, those thoughts went through my mind, but the story was so compelling that I didn't want to interrupt him. And literally, at the end of the story, I actually didn't want to know the answer. And we've left it like that. So I've never asked him. So anyways, to proceed with the story. So Chris goes back to bed, and he gets a couple more hours of sleep, and then gets up and goes to work like he usually does at the church, Willow Park Church. And so as he's coming in, there's, like a lot of churches, there's a min at the front desk answering the phone, so on and so forth. And so Chris goes up to her, and he goes, "I want to get my hair cut but I mean, this is something I haven't done in 5 years. I have no clue where to go. You got any suggestions? And so the admin, she goes, there's a great place just a couple blocks down the street from here, and I know a few people go there. Do you want me to try to make you an appointment? He goes, sure, perfect, go ahead. She goes, when do you want it? He goes, as soon as possible. Okay. So within not too long, she calls him up in his office and says, I got you an appointment at that salon. Here's the address. You have an appointment at 1. He goes, okay. So he goes on with his morning and has some lunch, and then 1 o'clock, he shows up at the salon. And so he, announces himself at the reception. It's Chris Neufeld. I have an appointment here at 1 o'clock. He says, yes, you will be with Betty today, and she'll be with you in just a few minutes. Please just have a seat. So a few minutes goes by, and so Betty comes out and collects him, and takes him to the chair. And so she goes, wow, like that's some head of hair you got there. And he goes, well, today it's coming off. She goes, you want to cut it off? He goes, yep. Are you sure about this? He goes, yep. Okay. So from what I understand, what happens, she literally takes a big pair of shears and holds on to the ponytail and close to the back and just snip, and there she is. She's holding his 5 years worth of hair. And so she goes, okay, Chris, so what do you want to do now? He goes, he had sort of a sad puppy dog look on his face, and he goes, I don't care, just do something with it. And she sort of sees this and goes, you don't seem like you're too happy about doing this. Why did you do it? He goes, well, God told me to. And she's like, pardon? He goes, God told me to. And he sort of explained, this is what I do, this is who I am, and God told me to cut my hair, and so here I am, and I've cut my hair. And she just breaks down, sobbing, crying, tears pouring down her face, just uncontrollable. And Chris is like, my goodness, what happened? What did I say? Are you okay? Are you all right? What's going on? And she goes, I just can't believe what you've done with your faith. It's just that I've been going through a real tough time right now. I'm a single mother, and my daughter has schizophrenia, and she's not taking her meds, and she's of age that the police can't do anything, can't force her to come home, and she's living on the street, and I can't get her to come home. I'm worried to death, and I just don't know what to do. And when I was young, when I was 13 years old, my mother died, and when I was at church, I told the priest that I was angry at God. And the priest scolded me and said I had no right to being angry at God, and asked me to leave, and I've never set foot in a church again. She goes, before you came in, I was actually crying in the back talking to my manager and about how upset with how my whole life situation is. And then she told me that I had to get out and see my 1 o'clock, and here you are telling me that God has asked you, has moved you in this way in your life. She goes, I just don't know what to do. Chris goes, I know what to do. He says, you need to pray. She goes, really? I don't even know how to do that, how I would do that. And he goes, would you like me to pray with you? We can pray right now. And so that's what they did. They, a lot of salons, there's sort of a row of chairs, the mirrors, and theirs was right on the end at the front by the window, and they got down on their knees right there in the hair, and they get up against the radiator, and they prayed, and they cried, and they cried, and they prayed. And when they were done, Chris got back in the seat, and she thanked him and finished cutting his hair. And as they're talking, he goes, you would always be welcome to come to my church at Willow Park. And she goes, well, thank you so much. I might take you up on that. So Chris leaves the salon, heads back to work, and As he gets back to the church, he makes a beeline for the head pastor's office. His name's Phil, knocks on the door and says, "You got a minute?" And Phil sees him and says, "Hey, you got your hair cut." And he goes, Chris sort of flops down in a chair and goes, "You wouldn't believe what's happened to me in the last 12 hours. And so Chris proceeds to tell him the story. And Phil goes, after he's done, Phil goes, "Wow, like that's just incredible. That's one of the most amazing stories I've ever seen." He says, so you know what you need to do, right? And Chris is like, "No." He goes, "Well, what you need to do is that every time someone makes a comment about you, that you've cut your hair, you need to tell them this story." And Chris goes, "Okay." He goes, "It's an amazing story. You have to share the story." And so that's what Chris had been doing. He'd been doing exactly that, including getting up in front of their congregation and sharing it through a message at church. And the story has actually even been published in Mennonite magazine, similar to our Observer, and about, answering the call of God, discerning God's will. Now, it's sort of a little bit of follow-up. 6 months later, which was actually the time when I'm talking to him on the phone, he said that Betty's daughter was home. She was on her meds. She was responding really well to therapy. They were both attending the church and been really embracing the congregation and embracing their church, and very active members. And things had gotten so much better in Betty's life. So anyways, what I'm trying to tell you from this story is that my brother Chris has a great ability to discern the will of God. Very open-minded to that message and then acting on it. As we're coming together for this covenant, this appointment with Milo and Doug, we need to recognize that they are answering that call. They are answering that discernment. They've discerned that this is where they need to minister. And Central, you have discerned God's will to bring them in and embrace them as your spiritual leadership. And I ask you to continue to pray. Keep your ears and your minds open to what that discernment is, and I know amazing things are ahead for you here at Central. I believe our next hymn is 216 in More Voices, "Wherever You May Go."
Milo Spooner Craig and Doug Craig, you have been appointed to work together in this pastoral charge. Will you promise in faith and obedience to Christ to share this ministry, supporting one another in love and through your unity of spirit, inspiring all God's people here in their common ministry for Christ?
We will.
We will.
Milo and Doug, in the presence of this congregation, do you commit yourself to this new trust and responsibility?
I do.
I do.
Will you accept the discipline of presbytery and, together with its other members, be responsible for oversight of the church's life?
I will.
I will.
Will you accept the support and encouragement of this pastoral charge and this presbytery?
I will.
I will.
And now I turn to the members of this congregation. Please stand if you are able. Will you join with Doug and Milo in a ministry of worship, study, prayer, and action within this pastoral charge and in the Word?
We will.
Will you support them as they minister among you?
We will.
Thank you. Please be seated. And now I turn to those who are here from Assiniboine Presbytery to stand, please, if you are able. And I also would like to ask you to come forward and stand in front of the table. Will you, come on, if you're, sorry, I wait all of you. Okay, thank you. Will you, as members of the presbytery, join with Milo and Doug in the ministry that is both theirs and ours? Will you exercise oversight for their work and witness, support, and encourage them in this ministry?
We will.
And now it's time to shake hands.
Shake hands.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to go on this side. Excuse me.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. And now the presentation of the symbols are going to take place.
He gets the book.
The Bible, share with us the teachings of Jesus Christ and inspire us through the leading of the Spirit.
Just stay there, Doug. Take this picture.
We have the cup, bread, and pitcher. Celebrate with us the joys of our sacramental life through communion and baptism.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Judy. Yeah. I don't know where to go.
Help us to see the broader vision, the big picture.
Oh, I'm taking that. Thank you. I better get back here. Go ahead.
Be as one who shares through books and conversation a wider spiritual life.
Thank you.
The bubbles are yours too. Little litter to go down. I got the fun part.
Nice bubbles.
I practiced.
Come celebrate, play, and share the teachings of the Bible with us.
Can I give you a hug?
Sure. Thank you.
Help us to engage in our decision-making with a sense of common purpose for our ministry together.
That was easy.
No, you can have it.
Do I give this to you now?
Yeah, give it to him.
Okay. Be as one who wipes away our tears and shares the joys and sorrows of life.
Just stay here because you've got words.
Central United Church Brandon, Doug Craig, Milo Spooner Craig. Let these symbols be signs of the ministry that is ours and yours in this place. Let us rejoice in the covenant we have made. And now you may go.
On behalf of the board and the congregation of Central United Church, we thank the Joint Needs Assessment Committee, the Joint Search Committee for your diligent work. We now release you from your duties with thanks.
If you want. Yeah, that's me. Oh, just wait a minute here. Oh. I'm sounding a bit bossy, I think. I just want to just share a little of my own story. Excuse me, because it's a bit heartfelt. April 30th, 2016, I think it was, I thought I was done ministry. I didn't think I was even going to walk. I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair, actually. So for me to be here today, excuse me, is just bigger than you know. Because I feel like God gave me another chance to do what I love to do and to do it with the man I love to do it with. So it's pretty good for me. Our prayers of the people are printed on the screen for us to pray together. Let us do so. Ever gracious God, you call people from near and far into the fellowship of our church, building upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, upon Jesus Christ, our companion and Savior, and upon all the saints who have gone before us. We give thanks for many years of church life, and especially for everyone who has served so faithfully. We give thanks for all in our midst today. Continue to watch over our congregation, we pray. Disturb our complacency, fill it again and again with your Spirit. Deepen our faith and our relationship with you, so that we may continue to be faithful co-workers with you, that all the world might see and praise you. In the name of Jesus, who is our light and inspiration, we pray the prayer that Jesus taught. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Our choir is going to share their gifts of music by singing As We Come Together.
By his love, filled with
I'd just like to thank Bernie and Mary and all the choir members who came tonight. It was a real treat and very much appreciated. Thank you. Let us call for the offering, which is given tonight to the Mission and Service Fund. For our offering song. Oh, 191, more voices. Oh, sorry. Well, we can do it. Let us pray together. O God, help us to love and serve you in all that we offer and all that we do. Amen. Take up his song.
Take up his song.
Go forth remembering who you are and to whom you belong.
Amen.
Let's go make a difference. For a time of fellowship.